Hi, this is Vince Cribbed. This is a follow-up video to my acceptance of Jerry Bauer's his challenge to open debate, and I just wanted to mention that Jerry Bowers was actually very gracious, and I wanted to thank him. He did follow through, and we had a public debate in Pal Talk, and there was a very good turnout, and I think the debate was a success. At least we had the opportunity to exchange ideas and to deal with certain scriptures. We both had the opportunity to make a case, and I think it went very well. Now, I was able to salvage some sort of recording from that. I was actually hoping Jerry would be able to make his own recording too, just in case, just as a backup. My recording I put together at the last minute, and I didn't really have the right equipment secured. So I was pretty busy that day, and then at the last minute, the only thing I could come up with was just record off of my laptop. So the quality is not very satisfactory, at least for Jerry's voice. It's hard to hear him. It's kind of faint. So what I wanted to do, and I'll see what he thinks, is I'll just make a video series dealing with portions, short portions dealing with particular verses, and then kind of edit out some of the parts where Jerry had some technical difficulties where he wasn't able to speak or he got kicked off, just to kind of condense it a little bit. And then on the parts where you can't really hear what Jerry is saying, but only faintly, I'll just add text on the screen so people don't have to strain their ears so much, but they'll be able to hear what he's saying at the same time, just to ensure the accuracy of my presentation and fair characterization of what he said, just to be fair. So I just thought also it would be relevant to deal with something that I experienced today. After my run before I went to work, I got on the internet, I got on Facebook, and I read a wall post of Terry Cropper, and he wrote something which I took the opportunity and liberty to make a comment on. I just disagreed with his statement and all the people that seemed to be agreeing with him, the home crowd. So I put an objection up, and like my gripe with Jerry, my comment seemed to just be deleted instead of any kind of uh, formal discussion over these things, because I dealt with something I think is incontrovertible when you deal with the grammar and take a look at it. So I think that's why it got deleted. And so I just wanted to take a second to talk about that and give my comments, just take that liberty. And Terry Cropper, he writes, in Genesis chapter 2, verses 15 to 17, God told Adam concerning the fruit of the tree, in the day you eat thereof, you will surely die. Amazingly, some say, the verse says, in the day you eat, in death you will be dying, meaning physical death. If Christ came to undo what happened in the garden, he failed. People still die physical. That's what it means. People die physically. My first objection really would be that Christians do not go around saying, in the day you eat, in death you will be dying, is the correct interpretation of in the day you eat thereof you will surely die. That's the NIV version, and we don't interpret it that way. Now the reason being is because if you look at the grammar, if you look at the Hebrew, the thing is the word dying, the stem, simple stem, it's actually a verbal. So when you translate it in English, the infinitive doesn't actually carry all these auxiliary verbs. That is, it doesn't function as a normal verb would. So you're not going to see you will be dying. Now if you take that away and you make it a verbal, like it is in the original, that's how we would translate it literally, then that's going to change the interpretation of the text. Now, there was actually one other person who I think agrees with my interpretation, Pascal Redfern. He writes, the literal translation is not death you will be dying, but dying you shall die. The force of this dying ye shall die is to show the certainty of the punishment, the penalty being conveyed, or the corruption thereof, being conveyed immediately by the transgression of the commandment of God. So we see this sin is definitely imputed. He breaks the law, and immediately corruption is conveyed on him that leads unto death. The force is the certainty of that dying. Not so much when he will he die immediately, but the corruption conveyed is, and the penalty thereof is immediate upon breaking the commandment. Now, that's Christian interpretation, and I don't think Terry Cropper affords the conservative Christian the opportunity to make that case. And the reason I think he's applying this to conservative Christians generally, not just some Christians who say this, that are real radical. For one, I can't find on the internet, I do a Google search, and I can't find a Christian making that statement. All I can find is Osho. And Terry Cropper forms an argument. It's not a logical argument. That is, it's not logical in its form. But he makes an argument constructed against the claim that this passage could be interpreted to mean physical death. Now, the Christian dogmatist, or anybody that really studies this, generally is not going to presume that this text deals primarily, or that the penalty of the transgression of this sin is not primarily physical. But it does include physical death, as Pascal Redfern implies by his statement. The construction of Terry Cropper's argument is that because people still die physically, that Christ's mission, or the effect of his work, could not have possibly been accomplished, or that he failed his mission if people still die physically, because in his first advent, his first coming, and the cross, if that was supposed to reverse the curse that we see in Genesis chapter 2, verses 15 to 17, then because people still die, because the church, the visible church, and the elect, they still die, that therefore Christ's mission, if it were effectual, was not intended to deal with their mortality. It is part of Terry Cropper's Hyper-Preterism that holds in his system that mortality, or that Adam was created mortal. So let's take a look at Terry's argument here, because it is almost as if Christ came in his first advent to deal with a problem or some kind of death, and because that application of that saving grace obviously has not dealt with the physical mortality of the elect up until this day, that therefore, if that were his mission, he failed. So that would seem absurd, so that can't be what he came to do. Now, Terry Cropper's position, we see his article on his blog spot, The Great Gifts of All Our Salvation, Sunday, November 22nd, 2009, same place. Weren't the apostles and their converts already saved? Yes, they were, but not in the fullness that came in the parousia. He goes on to say, the cross was a process of salvation. Paul and all the apostles know they hadn't received all that was to be theirs at the cross, and their writings reflected that truth. Paul and I think it means knew, the cross was the start of salvation, not the final end to salvation. So Terry Cropper's system actually does allow for a probation or intermediate period in time between the cross and the fullness of the realization of the application of those saving graces. That is, a resurrection which would happen in its fullness after the cross. So there's this intermediate period where that original curse had not been dealt with, at least not in its fullness. It was saved in some they were saved in some sense, but the full application of those saving graces had not come until its full consummation, at least in Terry Cropper's system. Now, why he has this allotted in his system and not in a conservative Christian dogmatic position shows that his position has a double standard, or at least his argument has a double standard. As always, grace be to you.